Jamie here. Hope everyone is doing outstanding. June 18th, 2024. We have about 40 minutes to the open. Really quick talk about the markets, names I'm looking at, and go from there. But what a remarkable, not a remarkable, but a nice melt up yesterday, and that's on the heels of last week's 1.58 or so gain on the S&P. And we're at more all-time highs. And this is the little chart, and I think it was Charlie, I forget what his last, how you pronounce his last name, but it's 30 all-time highs so far in 2024, and we're not even halfway through the year. Back in 2021, we had 70 all-time highs, and last year we had no all-time highs. So new highs beget new highs. I keep saying that. I'm surprised we broke through 545 all the way up to near 550 on the SPY yesterday before pulling back. This morning, retail sales numbers came in slightly lower than I shouldn't say slightly lower than expected. The expectation was a positive 0.3%. It came in negative 0.1%. Good news, bad news is somewhat good news, I guess you would say. I wouldn't want to see an extremely strong number because then I think it'll kind of take away some of the positivity out of that CPI data last week. But then on the flip side, I'm sure it's just a matter of time. We're at all-time highs. The market's pumping. People are always pointing out to these little data points, divergence. Only a couple stocks or most of this big move in the S&P. All these different variables that people look at and try and create some fear and paint this picture that we're going to have this a big crash. And the next one, of course, is a recession, right? The retail sales numbers are down. The jobs report weaker than expected. But the thing is, the Fed now they can start cutting rates, right? And if even if things start to look that way, the Fed is in a little better position than they were before. So a little different if we're a recession and they have to keep raising rates because inflation's out of control. So maybe some chop here today. We're above the upper Bollinger Band on the SPY, which 546, 545.66. So that'd probably be an area of support. I won't be surprised if we close under that today. And then markets are closed tomorrow. Don't forget that. And then 2 more days to end the week. And then I keep talking about the small cap. Small cap's up 0.84%. So showing some signs. It closed pretty much right at 200. The IWM would love to see that show some strength today. But again, small caps are in the red this morning. Why isn't this coming up? Down, small cap futures are down about 0.3%. So hopefully those can find some footing and cause be a catalyst for a little more upside in the coming days and weeks. So yesterday is one of those days where I just sat on my hands. I was looking at Broadcom calls. I talked about the earnings smash up and how some of these names, when they have great earnings, they've run for quite a few days. Premiums are insane. I was looking at even the 2,000 strikes that expired on Friday. Insane. I think there were 6,000 change. And then you have to factor in Wednesday with the market being closed. So technically speaking, there was only 3.5 days left in the week when I was looking at the strikes. And same with Arista Network. So, last week I had the Arista Network calls all the way up to into the 331 handle, then back down. I locked most of those calls, and then sure enough, was it due the first day after expiration? It's it rallies past substantially past uh, my strike price, going all the way up to 341 and change, and it was gapping this morning at 343. It's since have come down a bit, so we'll have to see. At some point, there'll be a pull in these names. There'll be, I always call it the greed reset. If that if that sets in at any point, I'll certainly go flip on the other side with Broadcom. Not sure I would do with Arista just yet. Other names, and I'm not going to talk too much about Turn, but Turn typically when it has a down day, it's like a 6, 7, 8% down day. It was only down 3%, choppy. It was actually green into the late afternoon, past 2 o'clock. So still in that solid uptrend, still have Turn for upside. Still watching GPCR here. I talked about the bull flag. I keep talking about the bull flag on HPQ. GPCR also has a bull flag potentially setting up, but I'm not going to try and catch a falling knife here. So it's kind of been melting. It was 60, I think it's $62 after its data. Now it's down here, closed at 48.58. Finally in the greens. If it holds green, shows some strength, I'll finally look for some strikes. I think it heads to $70 in the coming months, and probably one of the top 1 or 2 names that might be acquired in the GLP-1 space. And my favorite, of course, VKTX. That finally showed signs yesterday of maybe starting to bounce all the way up to $54, then gave it all back to close flat. At some point that takes off, but I'm not going to add any more strikes just yet. Maybe when it gets back over 60 bucks. Dell. So you have yesterday morning, Morgan Stanley just reiterated their outperform rating and their 100, I think 155 price target. But then they also talked about in their analyst note that it could rise to 200 bucks, and I wouldn't rule out higher than that. Um, I've said it for the last since their earnings. I still think that there's margins in their AI servers. So I think a lot of the sell off is number one is the profit takers, and then number two maybe some people trying to take advantage and shorted it. I don't know, but I think it heads into the 160s in the coming weeks. My July strikes are back in the green. Gonna need a huge move for my June strikes, but I may look for more calls if it shows more strength today. Maybe 147, 148 break. It's gapping here higher. It tested 146 in the pre-market. So definitely looking for more strikes there because I think once that gets going again, it's gonna be off to the races. You can see it with Super Micro too. Super Micro, it seems like it consolidate, and now it's starting to break out, and that probably is over $1,000 in the coming days. HPQ, that I adjusted my bull flag on it. Let's see if I post it in the chat room, but still has a nice bull flag setting up on HPQ. Slow and steady. 1% for HPQ is like 3-4% for Dell. I think it heads to 40 bucks in the coming days. Well, coming weeks, excuse me. Universal Display. So when I posted in the private Twitter and in the chat room yesterday afternoon that was a name I would look to get some strikes on. I still have the June 220s. I had those 210s last week that I sold for profits. I think goes 240, 245 possibly in coming weeks. And the fact that it's not only has it held its June gains so far, but it continues to rally. Uh, Definitely a name I could see, July, and probably the July 230 is a July 240 strikes I'll be looking at the open or a little bit after the open, possibly add some strikes on that. And then last but not least is spot. So when I had the calls, when it ran up to 330, made some nice coin on the calls for that move. Then it pulled all the way back, and now it's consolidating down there at 310. What did it hit here in the pre-market? I had it up on the pre-market, and all of a sudden was down to three. Yes, it's someone painted down to 310. But that could be a name I possibly look for some spec calls because if you look, the premiums aren't too bad on spot for if you're looking on a weekly basis. The 325s, those might lose a little premium at the open if it opens red, and maybe I'll look to get some 325s, hold those into Thursday and go from there because I love the spot story. I think at some point it heads back to all-time highs and then 345, 350 and beyond. I think that's about it. So retail sales numbers out of the way. There's Fed speakers today and Fed speakers Thursday. Kashkari, I believe is pronounced the Minneapolis governor. He's the one that I guess that moved markets a little bit, but outside of that, there's not much in the way of market moving catalysts into the end of the week. So could be one of those where we either melt higher or the bears start to take advantage and maybe cause a pullback at some point. So open to both scenarios. For me, I would love to see some chops, some consolidation first before we get over 550 on the SPY and go from there. That's it, folks. Let's have a great day. I'll be back on audio later. Rock and roll.